honestly, like to be here amongst you all, I think like it's I'm very honoured. If we were representing animals at the Japan Olympics, I think we'd have a pretty good team put together. We've got some rock stars in the animal world. So Nova, thank you so much for bringing us all together here tonight, and everyone for braving the weather. So it's been about 18 months since I've been able to get back here to the US. This is our main support base. As much as I love Africa, it's good to be able to get off the continent after 18 months being there and have things like electricity and water and supermarkets that are full and fuel stations that have fuel. But since I was here last, I come here with what I see as very profound proof of our work in the field. And to summarise that work and where we are at the moment is that, and I think this is very relative in the current climate that we are in America, is that putting women into the forefront of law enforcement can change the dynamics of society for the better. And we found that out the hard way. We started conservation work in 2009. Me coming from a military background, having worked in Iraq as well, training law enforcement, battalion-sized groups up to 1,200 at a time and deploying them out around the country, and watching the conflict that those battalions caused into each region that they were deployed to. When I entered conservation, conservation was also becoming increasingly militarized, and that was through desperation, I will say. And people were essentially drawing a line in the sand and saying, we've had enough. We need to protect animals like elephant and rhino that were being hunted by organized crime syndicates crossing international borders using heavy caliber and automatic weapons to take out animals that essentially should be locked in safes, running around areas the size of small countries. So, and me having personally come from Iraq, working within a $600 billion a year annual defense budget where we had absolutely everything, to come over and see rain, and we were looking after resources in the ground and dotted lines on a map, and fighting the arguments of old men, and to come over and see rangers looking after the heart and lungs of the planet and not getting access to just basic stuff like boots, uniforms, radios, being able to communicate, being able to get home and see their family. That for me in 2009 was enough to want to sell up everything that I'd managed to put together as a property portfolio in Australia and establish the IAPF, the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. And for 7 years we went out, we were a service provider, going out working for other organisations, protecting their areas, helping them structure their ranger training courses, and working on the front lines of conservation. We were essentially investing money each year to have an ongoing conflict with surrounding communities in what's known as fortress conservation. We were very good at it. We were very good at protecting a perimeter and stopping poachers from coming in and killing these animals. And it felt like every day we were doing something, the poachers were coming up with new tactics to come and circumvent the strategies that we were using. I read a report from the UN Population Division that said Africa's going to have 2 billion people by 2040. And I used to start my lectures over here by saying, don't think of us as the solution. Think of us as like a paramedic. We're trying to get this situation to the operating table so someone with a better solution can come in and try and fix what it is we're doing. Building bigger fences and defending them with more guns was not the future. We just didn't know what the future could be. I read a report, I actually read an article in the New York Times in 2017, the beginning of 2017. It was about the US Army Rangers training women in preparation for frontline deployment. Now, that article in itself is very interesting, to see women being prepared for such a role, given the climate or the context of the units I'd come from. Special operations, being a Navy diver, these were exclusively male-only units. But what was special to me about this article in the New York Times was that a decade before reading that, we'd been on a mission in northern Baghdad when our convoy had been blown up. And we were not in a good situation. And it was the US Army Rangers that actually came in and got us out alive, got us back to a base. And it's the work that they did that day that is the reason I'm able to sit here today and talk about it. And so reading this article 10 years later, I'm thinking, well, if the unit that was good enough to save my life 10 years ago is now training women to do that role, then maybe women should be wildlife rangers as well. And and I mean proper ones, not just stuck on a fence, walking a fence line, stuck on a desk or a gate. So as an industry, conservation, women are outnumbered on the front lines at a ratio of about 100 to 1. So they're not given the access to get the experience they need to rise up into management positions. So we're stagnating. There's other industries getting well ahead by getting women into more management positions, more women on boards, more women as CEOs. And we, as conservationists, if we were getting it right, the situation would be much better. So we were looking at a way to try and bring what was an increasingly hostile industry of conservation, antagonistic with local Indigenous communities, to try and bring those two together. Because the more antagonistic we got, the bigger the costs got as we became militarized. We needed helicopters, we needed military-grade optics, canine attack teams, more personnel, more guns, bigger fences, and it was just this perpetual downward spiral. We started a trial in 2017 with 16 women drawn from local communities in Zimbabwe. We had to find a blank canvas to trial this. We couldn't just walk in and get rid of all the men and then come in and put all the women there. So we found a blank canvas in a dying trophy hunting industry. Now across Africa, there's twice as much land set aside under communal land trust as what there is held under national parks. So think of a landscape as a jigsaw puzzle. National parks make up a few of those pieces. Areas held under traditional land trusts are all the bits that go in between, and they're owned by the local communities, they're managed by the local communities, but they're being lost, they're being left vacant, and communities are looking for different economic models to implement there, and if they can't find it, these areas will be lost to agriculture or to human settlement. So we wanted to not look at hunting as an argument to be had, we wanted to look at it as an equation to be solved. And so we were given a blank canvas to go and trial this program, and to be fair, it was the seventh area that we tried. So we had negotiations and talks with 6 other organisations or areas or communities previously, and no one wanted to take the risk of putting women out there on the front lines into a traditionally male role in a very patriarchal society. And we managed to negotiate a deal with the chief and local government there. They gave us 3 days to trial this program where we would put women through similar training to what we'd been through in selections and going into the units that I served upon. And for no other reason other than we want to fight for the underdog, and if a job was going to be created at the end of this trial, then let's give it to the people that need it the most. And when I first arrived in Zimbabwe, it had the lowest life expectancy in the world for a woman, and that was 36 years of age. And that situation has improved today, but it's still a very tough place living in rural Zimbabwe, or rural Africa for that matter, for a woman. About halfway through day one of the first the first 87 women going through selection, we knew we had something very special on our hands. The responsibility very quickly shifted from these women improving themselves that they were worthy of the job. It shifted back onto us instructors. We had to get these women ready to go out and defend an area that had lost 8,000 elephants to armed poachers in the previous 16 years. And so while we could hope for the best, we actually had to prepare these women for the worst. That was back in August 2017. The first 16 women went through training. We now have 240 staff. We started on 90,000 acres. We now have a portfolio of 1.3 million acres that have been reclaimed. These are areas that would have been lost. I'll take that, thank you very much. You guys don't mind. It does look very good. These are areas that would have been lost, and I think at a time when civilization's been brought to its knees by a pandemic, which is a result of how we treat nature, we can't afford to be losing areas where biodiversity is so rich and so important. Some of the things that have made this program work, the first one is Zimbabwe ranks around 156 out of 175 countries on the Global Corruption Index. We haven't had a single incidence of corruption with the women yet. Now, they're either really good at it, and we haven't caught it, or it's just not happening. So in a place like Zimbabwe, if you can remove corruption from the equation, you're already halfway home to achieving what it is you're trying to do. This component of the benefits of the program shifts the entire economics of conservation and what it is we're trying to do in holding on to these areas. So historically, we would recruit men from far afield, in some cases hundreds of miles away, to come in and defend an area from the local population that actually owned the land. And the reason that we would bring in men externally is so they weren't influenced by people that they may have grown up with. People giving out information where a patrol's going, or where high target species or high value species like elephant or rhino may be. And so as we haven't had to worry about this component as we scaled, it's turned the largest line item in our budgets, which is ranger salaries, from being something that was being dispersed around the country into communities far, far away, into something that's now going into the community at household level. So we, about 62 cents from every dollar we spend operationally is going back into the community, and about 80% of that is at household level into the hands of women. We can't buy things like engine oil and fuel and engine parts, but as much as we can spend in the local community is going back there. We did the maths. We took an aggregate of the last 3 years of hunting as it was failing, and we averaged that out over the amount of money that we were putting into the community each year on the pilot area where we started. And we worked out we're putting the same amount into the community every 34 days as what trophy hunting was able to do per annum. So we have an economic alternative to trophy hunting, which for us is only working with women at the center of the strategy. Then of course, a woman in rural Africa will spend between 80 and 90% of her salary on family and local community, versus a male that spends around 30 to 40%. So the bottom line actually triple gears. And at the same time, we get to spend the same dollar 3 times. First, on women's empowerment, which has now become the center of our strategy. Second, on community development as the most effective dollar that can be spent on rural community development in Africa. And third, conservation, which is a byproduct of happy communities, of communities that are functioning in a much better way, in a much more holistic way. We're having conservation, which is not so difficult anymore. We actually cut our operational cost by around 2/3. Because women naturally de-escalate the tension in a hostile situation. We've found men. I mean, my background is counterinsurgency warfare. Our job was to look for trouble and finish it. Women tend to want to talk to a problem before you blow it up or shoot it, which is fantastic if you're trying to have a relationship with tens of thousands of people that live alongside an area you're trying to protect with minimal resources and boots on the ground. So that I would say is, alongside a complete cessation of corruption, the reduction in the hostile activity in law enforcement is such a key component to this whole model and the relationship we have with the community. We found something far more important than biceps and bullets in law enforcement, and that's interpersonal relationships driven by the women at household level in the communities that their parents were raised, in the communities that they're raising their own family. The third major component that we're seeing with this expanding, well, not even experiment, case study anymore, is that women are fantastic at collecting information, plugged into the community at household level, a community that is on sides, is behind what we're doing. Around the world in law enforcement, around 3% of crimes are solved by catching someone in the act. It's like seeing someone jumping through a window. It's like, okay, that's the person there. The other 97% are solved through intelligence-led operations. And that requires information and communities that are happy enough and willing to give that information. So all those 3 components has given us a model that is now, that's the law enforcement component of what we're doing. Alongside that, we've plugged in education. We've got 120 school-age students, primary and secondary age students, mostly orphans coming through the scholarship program that we have. We're working on water sanitation in the communities. We're working on the clinics. Many of the clinics, when we arrive in a new area and go into partnership with local communities, they're delivering babies under candlelight with no medications at all. So just to be able to come in and put in a basic solar setup and put in some medications and get a fully qualified nurse in these areas is such a game changer for remote communities where people die because they don't have the fuel to get to another clinic that has a $5 malarial treatment drug. People die because they can't treat the most basic of infections and or have the resources to get out of these areas. So you can make huge leaps in these areas by doing very small things. Those combined with gender equality and local job creation in these communities have a formula that people are now starting to replicate across the continent. We are in the process of expanding this further into another country. I won't say exactly where at the moment, but a 1.7 million acre block of land. And as Neva said, we are on track to hopefully have 1,000 staff by the end of 2025, protecting an extensive network of nature reserves that have been reclaimed from poaching. Just before I hand it over, there's so many great minds here tonight. After I've had my say, I'm going to throw it open to the floor for questions, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff that I could go into great more detail on. But I just want to say from a personal standpoint to everybody here, just thank you so much for what you do and the dedication that you've all shown to animals and to the environment. And we've all got our different niches. Some people do it in the public spotlight, other people do it behind. We're fighting something, a great injustice across the planet. And some people do it through legal channels, some people do it through political channels, some people do it on the ground, some people do it in the darkness of night, in shadows, some people do it through the media. But we are all playing an extremely important part of a machine that is fighting back against this system. And to be a part of that, to sit here tonight with all of you, I'm extremely grateful. And just, thank you all so much for what it is you do. And I say, just keep having your conversations and keep getting better at them, and keep fighting the fight, because the conversations we have today may feel as though they're falling on deaf ears, but the truth is accumulative. So someone that you think may not be listening to what you're saying, they are, and it sinks in. It may take them a day, it may take them a decade, but keep having your conversations, keep doing it. Thank you very much.